relatively speaking, it's exhausted. And so, if we look at deliveries into plants now, we wouldn't have significant exportable stocks remaining of 2010 crops. So I think that's a positive thing. When we look at overall acreage in Canada, we definitely have a shifting economic trend and a very dynamic agricultural economy in Western Canada in the coming year. The deregulation of the Canadian Wheat Board will lead to the first time in the history of Western Canadian farmers in the last approximately 60 years where they are free to market cereal grains to anyone they choose. And so because of that, there's a lot of buzz and a lot of interest in cereal production. And of course, the prices have been very strong. And, agronomically and in terms of ease of growing conditions, wheat for farmers in Western Canada is a sure bet. So from that perspective, pulses need to be, they're a rotational crop. They're not going away. They're firmly entrenched in the rotation in Canada. I think, Jeff, you'll agree. In the U.S., we're growing that trend in terms of it becoming the rotational crop. In Canada, it is not an option. It will be a cereal, an oilseed, a legume, or a 4-year rotation where the legume will either be once or twice in the rotation. So, we have the acreage. The question is, what will they plant in the legume rotation? Lentil returns have lagged all other pulses. If we look, peas has been a very strong performer. Chickpeas with limited production has been a very strong performer. And lentils, as a result of very strong pricing over the past 3 seasons, we are back at levels that 5 years ago were considered a good level, but today they're considered a disastrous level for the farmers. So as a result of that, we're forecasting a further 20% decline in acreage coming this year. In addition, people are starting to talk about the winter season. And if we look at the winter season, for those of you who have been in Saskatchewan, on the 25th of December, we had not a snowflake on the ground. So we had dirt around our yards. The temperature was plus 6 degrees on Christmas Day. And we said if this continues, the population of Saskatchewan will be like India, maybe in the coming years, because it's a beautiful place, but usually people say it's too cold. Now it's not too cold any longer. So we're having a very unusual climate effect on the winter season. And if we look at it, snowfall is significantly behind average. And so there are definitely views of when we look at the dry fall, which led to a very good quality result for our harvest, the coming season, the snowfall is really a fraction of usual. And so there are starting to become concerns about topsoil moisture. And so we'll have to see how that all plays out as well. When you compound all of these effects, you have a stock level in Canada, but you certainly have acreage on the decline, and you have moisture concerns that are currently in the market. Now, Mahmoud, if I turn around from a perspective of the importer, I'd just like to have you give us a bit of a perspective on some of the factors that are playing into overall your business as an importer, processor, and re-exporter even. What are some of the concerns affecting the lentil market for you as a processor?
Yeah, thank you, Murad. First thing is, as you know, in 2009-10 we had quality issues, and as a splitter, in fact, we had, I'm sorry, we had more quality issues in 2009 because of the number 3s and extra 3 grades. But especially 2010-2011 crop, 2011-2012 crops has been very good, and we've been getting good quality from Australia, nuggets especially, and secondly again from Canada, the Crimson number 2s, and so there's no quality issues, especially this year. But our concern, especially in Sri Lanka, is that the government keeps on changing policies, right? When the prices of commodity, especially like lentils, are down, the duty structure goes up, and vice versa. When the prices go up, the duty structure comes down, and Another factor is, as you are also a big player in this split in Sri Lanka, market in Sri Lanka, the, it all depends on the vegetable prices. The lentil sales all depend on the vegetable prices. If the prices of vegetable are lower, the sale of lentils are reduced. And it's the other way around again. If the prices of vegetable go up, the sales are increased.
I think, it's certainly very apparent there are a lot of factors, that are affecting import, viability and import policy of government. It's certainly something that we're all watching very, very closely. On the panel, we have our speaker from India was unable to join us. So I think what I may do is I may ask, if anyone has any perspectives from the panel on their views on what they're hearing about India, what effect that may have on the market overall. We're not going to get into prices and things yet. We've got a few minutes on that, but let me start off the discussion to provoke a bit of discussion. If we look at the overall dynamics of the market today, we are certainly, I think, as a trade, acknowledging that there is certainly some reduction in acreage here, which is following the pattern of what we saw in Canada, U.S., Australia, and Turkey. And this change in acreage in the plantings is really a follow of cereals and oilseed prices. So with a reduction in acreage, reduction in the potential on pigeon peas, we certainly have a dynamic whereby the stock levels in the current crop coming seem to have the potential of having some pressure. But I think we all acknowledge that in India, no one knows until we come closer to the time of harvest and receivals. So, Will, maybe I'll ask you just if you have any perspective of what you're hearing, what your thoughts are, and how that'll affect the Australian market.
Sure, Murad. All I've heard is that, the acreage is down, and crop could be, I've heard all sorts of numbers, 10, 20, 50% down on normal. And it all depends if India turn to Australia and start to buy product from Australia, which we haven't really seen for quite a long time. So if that happens, it'll definitely have an impact, because our old crop might all disappear very quickly, and there'll be some pressure on when new crop arrives. So it make it, as always, India would make a huge difference if they did start buying in volume out of Australia.
Okay.
Just haven't seen anything yet. It's all just weather talk as usual. So.
Okay, Jeff?
Well, not that 2 days makes you an expert, but I did go out and spend 2 days driving in Madhya Pradesh here this past week. And basically, the general thought pattern was the crop is about 20 to 25% lower in that area this year. But I would say that the crop looked very, very good from everything that I could see. I expected to see plants here, plants there, but it looked like a U.S. or a Canadian crop as you drove through it. One thing that we heard in the Gala Mondays was that there was a lot of stock. There was a lot of people still with 2- and 3-year-old stock. So it feels like the market has plenty of product at this point in time, but definitely the crop is lower and behind in its maturity.
Right. Mahmood?
Yeah, and lately we've been hearing almost a 50% crop short in India because of the less seedings and less moisture. So probably what we are hearing is, and we should know by the end of this month, because how is the harvesting time. So we feel there's definitely a shortage in India.
Okay, good. I want to move on to currency effects. Currency effects are really a big issue. I think that if we look at the overall impact on the lentil sector, when we were doing some calculation today, and I want to throw out a couple of these, were very rough calculations, and we were talking about 2001. In 2001, CFR levels into Indian subcontinent for whole red lentils from Canada, for instance, were $325 CFR Indian main ports. So, 325. Is Sudhakar here? Where's Sudhakar? Is he here? And Sudhakar, are you a buyer at 325 today? Yeah. So 325 sounds like a level that is a phenomenal level, but if we look at it on a currency adjusted basis, 325 US, at the time the Canadian dollar was 62 cents US. If you do a currency adjusted basis today, 325 is equivalent to 535 US. So this effect between 325 and 535 is merely the move of the Canadian dollar. So when we look at it, currencies have a real effect on the baseline price in the market. You know, that's a perspective. Mehmet, I'm going to start back with you. As an importer, obviously currency is something that really has an effect on business.
Yeah, it's really affected, but lately I think probably you would have known since 5 days, our currency has been devalued by 8%, which really gives us a big impact on the price, on our imports. So it's a big impact, in fact, now, big impact.
Will?
Yeah, I mean, it's the same with the Australian dollar. Recent times, it started to move not 50, you know, it's moved cents. It's moved 3-4 cents in a day. So it makes a huge difference. And currently, we're looking at prices to the grower. The farmer's not really that pleased. We're at the bottom as far as prices in Australia go, but still on a CFR level, on a US dollar basis, the prices aren't that cheap. I mean, they're still, you know, fairly decent. So to the farmer back home, yeah, it has a big impact. The fact that, you know, as our dollar gets higher and higher and higher, his returns will either get less and less, and he just won't sell it, or our US dollar price will continue upwards.
And I think that the Australian currency is certainly one that has an effect of even much more dramatic than the Canadian. So when we look at, you know, the Australian dollar in 2009, I guess, was around, if I remember correctly, around 58 cents, 55. Now we're sitting at $1.08. So that is, you know, really a absolutely crazy revaluation of the currency. Jeff, you're in the land of stable currency because everyone talks about U.S., but any perspectives on currency effects?
Well, from our standpoint, utilizing the U.S. dollar, the biggest effect we see on it is our buyers' ability to pay as their currencies are devalued, and the demand structure that it brings to us. We typically lose demand as our dollar gets stronger, obviously.
So we have the two sides of the coin. I mean, it affects importers, it affects exporters, you know, on both sides for sure. One of the other things we'd written down here before we get into the real question and answer is quality standards of the crop. Now, we had panelists here who had a perspective on it. In the view of time, I think what we may say is we'll invite comments or questions as a part of this. There was a view of panelists that quality standards in Canada, US, Australia, Turkey, India are not synchronized. We don't have quantitative standards that are matching and definitions that are matching, and as a result, it's causing some problems in the trade. Invite any perspectives. Jeff, why don't you give us a quick one on that one?
Yeah, definitely it's a struggle for us to go out and sell our product when you have, every country has a different view of what a number 1 lentil is, a number 2 lentil is, a number 3 lentil is. And probably in the U.S., we may suffer the worst because our grading system probably isn't exact as a Canadian, and the world kind of looks at a Canadian standard and compares us to it, whereas we make no comment for wrinkle whatsoever, and you can still grade number 1 with a high amount of wrinkle to it. So it's difficult to go out around the world and market this product and be compared, you know, with this standard, that standard, and our standard. And all of our exporting countries have very good trade associations, and I would certainly recommend that these trade associations get together as a beginning, get these trade associations together and get them to somehow pressure the inspection agencies in their respective countries to try to standardize so that, you know, damage levels are the same for grade 1s, grade 2s, grade 3s, so on and so forth. Color levels are the same throughout, so everybody in the world has a better understanding of what is the quality standard.
Mahmood? Yeah, quality is a big concern here. We do agree that, you know, as a splitter, we require a good quality product for the end user, for us to give the end user, again, a good quality split product. So that's a big concern. In fact, you know, as I said before, the 2010-2011 crop, we had big issues. But lately, what we've been receiving is the quality have been quite good. There was no issues in it. Yeah.
Will, how do you think Australia does on this side?
Yeah, well, I think our standards are pretty good. They've been set for a while and they don't change, and we've never really had any problems with them because as long as you're buying what you think you're buying and the receiver, the bulk handler, has done his job in receiving it the correct way, then we don't really have an issue with it. And every year we'll have a meeting pre-harvest. If there is an upcoming quality issue with a weather situation, then they'll adjust and they'll open a new grade for whatever that is. So yeah, no, I think out of Australia it works pretty well for us.
Just from a Canadian perspective, I think it's important for the importers to know that I have been appointed to the Western Standard Subcommittee for Pulses for the Canadian Grain Commission. So I've agreed to serve on that committee for, I think, 5-year term. And one of the issues that we will be addressing is the grading standards on red lentils, and that we will be looking at the introduction of quantitative standards related to wrinkle and damage. The process in Canada, for those of you to understand, is not something to just decide a change. There has to be grower consultation. There is a process that has to be followed, and the target for a standard change, if it is recommended, would be 2013 crop. So this will take about 1 full season to get to that point. So we all pray for good weather, and we'll continue to work diligently on that. A final wrap-up side. I think what we're going to do is Sudhakar pinned everybody to a $50 range on the chickpeas, and that's a wide range because chickpeas is a high value. So I'm going to pin you to a $5 range. No, I'm not. I'm just kidding with you. We've talked about all the factors. Will, you're going to start just because I like you so much, We talked about all the factors: currencies, liquidity of our importers. We've talked about supplies. We've talked about governmental policy, all in a very short period of time. What do you think in terms of price outlook for,